Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Data Sense podcast. This is the show where you learn from technical and business leaders how to connect business and data to develop your own sense to drive your business forward. Today, we have Paul Webb as our guest. Paul is a global energy expert, and he's based in the UK. He has been in the industry for 42 years. He is an author of various books on energy management. He started his career in nuclear and he's currently an independent consultant. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you. Thank you, Zane. Thank you for having me.
So, Paul, you started your career in nuclear and it's been a very long time. How has energy changed, and how do you feel where it started from and where it is currently?
Zane, thank you very much. And again, thank you for inviting me to be your guest today. And and thank you for reminding me that it's been a long time. Them words sort of haunt me, I suppose, a little bit. But 42 years, when I left school to start in the industry of energy, my father actually said to me that I needed to get into energy because it's the right industry to be getting into. It's the future, basically. And ever since I've been part of this industry, I've been so passionate about it. You know, it's gone through so many different drivers and changes. And if we go back to, say, 42 years ago, it wasn't about the climate. It wasn't about carbon emissions. It was all about money, you know, and all about saving the penny, basically. And yeah, I can remember growing up and we had loads of blackouts, and we've just talked about offline having power cuts and strikes in those days of, going back. And it was quite volatile, I think, in the early days, energy. We, at a nuclear power station, had to run constantly because that's the way nuclear power actually operated. It ran at a fixed level. It didn't provide peaks and troughs. In the early days, energy for me was just straightforward. It was, we needed energy. I went to work to deliver a power station that run non-stop. And during them times, it wasn't about the environment. Them times have come at a later date, really. And I've seen step changes regarding that. And I can't really explain all the step changes, but it's been driven by legislation. There's been a lot of legislation around recently, really. Since 2008, we had some legislation come in, then legislation again in 2012 and 16, where it started to evolve further and further. And now we're now seeing legislation with the larger organisations of the ESOS, which is Energy Saving Opportunity Schemes, which is that's the UK version of a European directive. So there's a lot of standards and things that are being addressed Europe-wide. And then we've now got the streamlined energy carbon reporting that's come out. But unfortunately, what I'm noticing now really is it only impacts on the larger organisations. We really are leaving behind the smaller companies to fend for themselves regarding this, which is, for me, a challenge going forward.
That's quite interesting. And the thing is, that actually brings me to a very sort of interesting question on, I've seen that there have been a lot of small companies that have gone bust, last year, even before the current energy crisis. And that was purely because the amount of usage went up last year. And so the price of gas went up. And so the smaller energy companies find it very difficult to make a profit. And what's even more, I guess, difficult is energy companies have it very difficult in terms of how they sign up customers, and the meters and different kind of meters, prepaid meters, smart meters, the version of smart meter, and then you have two meters, right? Gas and electricity, and it could be a combination of anything. And it just makes it so difficult to sign up a customer and finally get that customer onboarded and everything, sorted. Have you what would you say about that? Have you noticed that problem as well? And is there a solution to that?
So currently, the energy market is very, very complex. And it has been complex for many years since they opened. So in the early 90s, they opened the market up, and they decided that, you know, we wanted more competition, more opportunities to get the better rates, etc., and the different flexibilities. But unfortunately, what that did, it created so much confusion in the marketplace and complexity. So you're right in what you're saying. We have, you know, not only do we have different metering, gas and electric, obviously, but within those different sort of categories of gas, we have commercial and non-commercial, we have residential. So already you're starting to break them down, and you have bespoke gas as well when you get the bigger organisations. We've also got electricity. We've got non-half hourly, half hourly, and then that breaks down into all different types of contract levels. And then the larger the contracts you get, they break it down even further. And there's probably hundreds and hundreds of different tariffs that an organisation could sign up to. So not only is it complex, we've got the complexity in the supply world. We've got this complexity on the customer world, and that's even more because there's more customers that have got that complexity as well. And I wouldn't defend the suppliers here by saying it's difficult for them to sign up the organisations. It's because of the marketplace is so complex anyway. You know, I think we've seen a lot of suppliers go bust recently because of the price increases, because they've either hedged. So energy is traded as a commodity, and it's traded on an hourly basis, and it's just like trading any other commodity. And if it goes up for any reason, and and it hasn't just been the Putin issue and the Ukraine conflicts as such. It isn't just that that's caused the problem. We can take it back to before, like last summer. So last summer we didn't have no wind, and we didn't have so we had no wind and no sun. That put pressure because we then had to use gas to actually generate electricity. Because of that, coming into winter, we didn't have enough storage because we'd used too much gas. The UK government had already pulled the plug on a lot of storage capacity regarding funding. So we had to close certain areas to store the gas. So again, we had limited storage. We used too much. We then had the issues with the canal got blocked later on in the year. So it then started to spiral. And forget about what's happened in Ukraine. That's just exploded the situation. We also had a fire on one of the interconnectors as well. So there's been loads of different things that have built up and up and up. And I've seen energy rise in some of my particular clients of 185% in the last 12 months. Now, if we go back further, that's a 400% increase. Now, one of my clients was paying 1.3 million for their energy for the year. They're now paying 5 million. Now, that's across all the industry. Wow. If we was to take that across all industry, so that is one of my largest customers, one of my smallest customers. He's going to be seeing a energy bill on his small restaurant of £5,000. That's going to close him down. We're going to see a lot of organisations being forced to close down. And I'm hoping Liz Truss, when she comes in, I think tomorrow there's going to be loads of announcements. I'm hoping that those announcements are going to really sort of freeze down this problem we've got at the moment. We need to go back a little bit in time to reduce it down even further. But there needs to be some stability here now, because we've just seen it absolutely accelerate. Now, you know, my advice would have been, before the government was going to make these announcements, previously was to lock your energy in. I've locked my house in for 2 years, so I've got budget certainty. I know loads of people who haven't done that. I'm paying about 24p for my unit rate currently. I've seen people paying 45, 48 pence. I've seen prices of 90 pence. on the market. It's quite frightening, really. It's not using the word sustainable, it isn't sustainable. It's quite scary, really.
So, with the... Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I've seen bills just rising and rising. One question I have on that, with customers, one thing I've seen, from data perspective, is that when a customer signs up or when there's a new customer, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. I can't imagine how it was before, all on paper, right? That must have been crazy. But even on with using the latest tools, cloud data, it's still quite complex. So what I'm wondering is that, what would you say? Would you say that it would be better to simplify that process, and should government do it? Or is it something that it should be complex because, some middlemen benefit from the complexity?
No, it shouldn't be complex at all, really. Energy management, I teach energy management, and I always take energy management back to the basics, and we should be doing that with the data. We've got electricity meter collecting kilowatt hours. We get charged versus kilowatt hours. So straight away, there's two simple calculations there. Energy is recorded initially in kilowatts. So for every hour of kilowatt becomes a kilowatt hour. So again, it's very simple calculations that need to be sort of put together. The complexity, unfortunately, comes in because there's so many different types of meters out there. But we do have data collectors in the UK. So I work with one, and I used to be an employee working with them, a company called IMSurf. They were the original, before the government broke up the industry, they were the original data collectors. And they've got a very simple system that is able to collect the larger sites of data and bring that data back. Unfortunately, we did start a program for smart metering. So everyone needs to go smart metering. If we can get that program rolling again, then there's a lot of smart, clever things we can do with that data, and the infrastructure is there, and the process is there to do that. We just need to accelerate that program, really. So there is a data process in place, but it just needs to be completed.
So I worked with some smart meters as well, and one thing I saw is that there's two versions of smart meters. There's version 1 and version 2. And I think even with, I remember with version 2 it's still not smart enough as you would say, with other sort of, with latest technology, because even version 2 is quite old. And there probably needs to be like a version 3, but with version 3, it should be consistent, universal, and then everyone needs to have the same meter so that it's quite consistent and makes it easier for everyone to measure.
Yeah, I agree with you because obviously, because you can move from one supplier to the next. I moved from one supplier to the next, and I had a smart meter. Then the new supplier said we can't communicate with that smart meter. So there does need to be some why are we complexing things and going off with these different types of meters?
I agree. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Yeah. So how, where else do you see, how can, I've seen data being a very useful tool, especially in predicting, predicting demand of gas and electricity in various areas. What would you say data can do for energy companies? How can energy companies use data for energy management and other things?
So are you referring to organizations using the data to manage their energy, yeah?
Yeah. And for example, they're already collecting a lot of data, but are they using smart meter data and other data as much as they should be?
Is a clear answer there, and the answer is no. So when we get the energy suppliers aren't working with the, let's break it into two. So you've got the organization that are using the energy, and then you've got the supplier that's requiring the data. So we need two routes. So we need to be providing data to the supplier to build the energy, and the organization needs to take that data to then manipulate it and make a decision on it. So you mentioned I'm an author. I've written various books on this subject, and one of the things that I've put together is the 4 principles of energy management, and it is we review the energy, we review the energy consumption, we review how we're using the energy. We then realign that energy. So we realign the contract, we realign how we use it with the people. The third part of that is we reduce. So based on what the review and the realignment, we understand how to actually then reduce the energy. And then lastly, we will report on it. All of these areas we're actually utilising the data. Now, the data will come in various different formats. Ideally, it will come from some form of smart meter. However, it doesn't need to, because we can take manual readings of the meter if the meter is accessible and we can gather that information. So if we can get in the habit, if an organisation can get in the habit of absorbing that energy data, whether it be through a system or through manually reading, then they can start to manage. And we can't manage what we don't measure. That is very key. It's an old-fashioned saying, but it's a very key saying. I talk about that a lot on LinkedIn regarding let's get that data and let's review it so we can actually start to manage that data. But the problem is, and the supplier and the organisation they've got two different needs for that data. The suppliers don't help the organisation manage energy. That is a problem, I think.
So obviously you're an independent consultant and you have clients yourself. Are there clients who are using or trying to use data as much as possible correctly so that they can manage their energy usage?
All my clients will go through a process of using the data. It's important. Not all my clients from day one understands where they can get that data. They don't realise though I said the energy industry is complex, it also needs a lot of teaching. There's a lot of things that the suppliers know that the organisations don't know. And one of the things is some of these meters have got available data. And that available data is the last 2 years of information. And that is very valuable. And to give you an example of that, I was asked to do a review for an organisation. We looked at the last 2 years of data. My first question to the organisation was, do you work at the weekends? And he said, no, the building's shut down. And I said, well, I'm going to show you some data that shows your building's operating through the weekend. And they wasn't aware of that because they didn't understand that they could go and get that data.
That's quite interesting. That's quite interesting. Yeah. I advocate the same sort of thing with cloud resources. So if you're running something on the cloud and if you're not using it in the evenings and weekend, it should be off. Exactly. It should only turn on when you need it. And the great thing about cloud resources, with these cloud native tools, is that you can shut them off when you don't need them. They should not be running when you don't need them. And 90% of organizations don't know that. They just leave it running. In fact, there are so many things running, it's unbelievable. So, that I can totally relate to. It's just a building. If you're not using it, turn it off.
Yeah. Zane, some of the things we've just discussed now, I've started sharing that with people who own houses. So I've started doing something quite radical where during the day, if I'm not here, I turn my fridge off. I've started turning my fridge off every single day for 3 hours a day because I'm not using it. And if you don't open that fridge, the stuff the food inside isn't going to get warm as such. So there's things like that we can take from business regarding turning things off, and we can actually bring that into the home, because there's a lot of areas we could be making savings at home. You know, how many people that go to work leave their TVs on standby? You know, I was quite shocked recently when I checked to see how much wattage my TV was pulling on standby. It was significant. If I'd left my TV on standby for the whole year, it was £130 worth of energy. It's a lot of money.
Mm.
That's an evening out for a nice meal.
Yeah. That's true. So that's quite interesting. With that, what do you see as the biggest problem in terms of companies becoming data oriented or seeing their energy usage? What's the biggest blocker?
The biggest blocker is time and systems in place. There are systems out there in the marketplace, but there isn't like an off the shelf, because one system doesn't fit all. You know, you could start off with Excel and put your own data in, but you've got to create your own spreadsheets as such. You could go and buy a package, but you can't use that package because it doesn't link to your building. So it takes a bit of time to go from A to B. So what we need out there really is systems that are very quick and easy to plug and play, and to be able to take your data on and take it to a position where data in, and then I can start managing. So there needs to be there are systems, as I say, but we need a system out there that can take that data very quickly and start running with it very quickly. I think that's our biggest challenge. And then the next challenge is understanding. So I'm an energy expert. I can pick up a graph and understand what's happening there. A person who's running a business, he knows how to bake a cake, bake bread, deliver finances or whatever his services are. Does he know how to manage energy, and does he know how to look at a graph? Probably not. So that knowledge base needs to be improved on. But the software, I think, and the data manipulation needs to deliver that for him. So he needs to have some form of system where he could, you know, this is magic one time, because there isn't really, there's people out there working towards this, but there's not people out there exactly ready for this. But, you know, if we had a magic wand, which I often say, I'd love to have a magic wand, because if I had one, I'd have a package that sat there. You just plug straight into it, and then the graph would come up, but it would have come up with knowledge to tell you what needs to be done. You know, my organisation that I was working with previously would have got that graph in front of them and said, "Did you know we're using energy at the weekend? And we shouldn't be, because we've got no one working. We need to make changes to that." So I've seen software being developed over here now that will one day probably be able to fix this issue.
So that's quite interesting. I guess software can definitely help. Data can definitely help as well. Are your clients feeling that, you know what, we don't want to be using too much technology to manage energy? Is that some sort of is there an appetite for staying as it is, not wanting to change? Does that happen?
So we have various different types of approaches here. We have organisations that come to us and say, "I need solar on my roof. I need this done to save energy." And then others don't know where they want to start. I always say that energy management is a journey. We need to take baby steps. We need to, first of all, implement the 4 principles of energy management. And if we go through the 4 principles, the changes happen gradually. we can't go from installing solar on our roofs today if we haven't looked at turning all our things down or adjusting things ready now. Because what would happen is you'd have a very large solar system on your roof, and then you come and do your energy management, and then the solar system's been oversized, and you're ending up exporting. Well, that's no good to anyone then. So it has to go through a process. And we do get, organizations want to save energy. They want to do it the best they can and the fast as they can. Me personally, the first approach is we look at managing the building through people, and then we look at technology. So initially, I would break it down into 3 areas. I look at no cost, which is the low hanging fruit. We would look at medium cost elements, and then we look at capital cost. The early stages, we're going to make some really good savings, and we're going to make the benefits there. But as we go past there, the organisation will need to spend to save. But if he's already started doing the no-cost stuff, he's already got the appetite to then do the spend-to-save approach. And he'll have no choice. You have to go from no cost to medium cost and then capital cost, because we, as an organisation, we're going to have to, in 2050, when we're looking at the net zero approach, all organisations are going to have to be in a position where they're net zero. That's a very big task to ask now. But we need to be looking at how we're going to get to that today.
So I have a question which is slightly away from the current topic. With the current energy crisis and winter is coming, and there's a whole thing about Russia not releasing more gas. Would you say the energy crisis will be over by after winter? There won't be any energy crisis, or is it likely to stay as it is?
I'm not a politician or as such. If we are in a situation where we are being restricted regarding gas, going through winter is going to be a tough winter for everybody. We need to manage our gas going forward, as all organisations, as a country specifically. Coming out of that, we're still going to need gas, because we generate energy through gas. So there's going to be a demand, whatever we need. I don't think this problem's going to go away very soon. I think we are here to stay for a long time, and we've just got to manage it the best we can. For me, it's managing the demand of it, not the supply. I feel, there's got to be people managing the supply, but it's got to be experts working with organisations. And I've seen some really good things happening from Octopus, for instance, and driving down demand. And they've been doing some trials, and I'm hoping things like that will come to more fruition, where they're offering organisations benefits, financial benefits, if they can reduce their energy down. And I think that's a great driver for what we need to happen. We need to focus on demand.
Right, that's quite interesting. Yeah, so that means we really need to focus on energy management as much as possible going forward.
It's always been funny. Energy, in my world of energy, okay, you've got solar power, you've got wind power, you've got all this exciting stuff. Energy management has never been the dare I say, the sexy part of the industry. Turning things off, shutting things down, managing's better. But really, that's the core of everything. We need to do that first. Do you know, if we was to, there's been studies done where, so I'm an energy consciousness consultant practitioner, basically, and that actually means that I can work with people to reduce their energy in organisations, and that's focusing on people and focusing on the existing systems. Okay. And just by focusing in that area, we could actually save 25% of the energy within that building. That's a significant amount of energy. And that could probably, just focusing in that area, could focus any and delay any crisis that we're going to be going through winter and after the winter.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. So just a last question I have for you. What's one thing you advocate? Now, I feel like you've already answered that question, in terms of energy management. But if there's something else that, there's one thing you have seen, you want to see in the world implemented, it'll make a place, it'll make the, world a better place. What would that be?
Yeah. I have mentioned it, but I'm going to sort of discuss it in a different way. So I would like all organizations to just review the 4 principles of energy management and just sit down as an organization and go through them 4 steps. That's all they need to do. And once they've completed those 4 steps, sit back and then answer the question, do they feel they're doing the right thing for their organization? So those 4 steps will reduce consumption, it will reduce cost, it will reduce carbon. The 3 main areas that we need to be focusing on. Cost, currently, because obviously the costs are rising significantly. But that last thing is, the last 6 months, we haven't been talking about the carbon emissions and the planet, So I talk about energy experts. I want to bring energy experts together to share knowledge, to reduce carbon, kilowatt hours, reduce carbon, and save our planet. We've lost our way over the last 6 months because of this crisis, because it's all been focusing on price. We need to get it back to focus on the planet, because we're heading towards a bigger crisis than what we're in at the moment.
Cool. Okay, that's quite helpful. Thank you. Paul is an energy expert, an independent consultant. You can reach Paul on LinkedIn as well as on b2benergy.co.uk. That's his consultancy. Thank you for being on the show, Paul.